Netflix is at a complicated stage in this post COVID world. Once the name of a diverse library of content and exclusive shows promoted by the platform, though at the expense of traditional venues for renting physical media, has now become a descending rabbit hole of competitive streaming platforms, shifting identity politics, big projects undergoing creative clashes, and exclusive shows and movies that straight belong to the dumpster fire. The one thing that still keeps Netflix's machine going, that they'll still cling on to for a couple more seasons, is none other than the hit property Stranger Things. Conceived and executed by new coming filmmakers, the Duffer Brothers, the show became a sleeper hit in 2016 and immediately grew into a cultural phenomenon. With 2 seasons to follow, Stranger Things became a household name across retailers, including Target shops, where merchandise of the show cannot be missed. But let's go back to the first season. Now, in the wake of media utilizing nostalgia to capitalize on old franchises and even original films from a different form that was used a while ago, Stranger Things was this project you didn't know what to expect from it. It had this Spielbergian Stephen King marketing appeal to it, and the mystery that lured audiences just from the poster itself. Coming off doing small work on HBO, the Duffers designed Stranger Things to not just throw back to the 80s, but it was an amalgamation of media samples that shaped the show into a product that was new and refreshing to the modern generation in the way that Star Wars was inspired by George Lucas's influence from Kurosawa movies, Joseph Campbell stories, and homages to the serials and classic films of the golden age of Hollywood. You can argue Stranger Things is not totally original with its ideas, but the perfect blend of 80s culture, movies, and shows of that period led to something new that people enjoyed and celebrate in the modern day. Now, beneath the nostalgic surface, the show had a solid story about a group of childhood friends whose lives are shaken by the disappearance of their friend, Will Byers, and the arrival of a strange looking girl of telepathic abilities going by the name Eleven. So the kids and even the adults, including Will's mother and the town's authority figure Jim Hopper, uncover a government conspiracy brewing within the small town of Hawkins in their search for Will, involving child experiments, cover-ups, and a gateway to an inverse dimension known as the Upside Down, where a monstrous creature known as the Demogorgon inhabits and kills anyone whenever it crosses into reality. The characters for the most part are likable and hold some well-rounded arcs with tropes and archetypes that are subverted or played around in ways you wouldn't expect. Now, is Steve Harrington the stereotypical dickish jock and bully character off a Stephen King fashion high school story? No, instead he has become one of the most wholesome and coolest characters as we follow him for the duration of the show. It's a simple product with so much depth, nuance, and even rich lore behind the mythology in Hawkins and the Upside Down, which left fans theorizing on what could it all mean in the bigger picture. But sadly for the Duffers, no one could have predicted huge success of its debut season, as originally it was designed to be its own one-off standalone story, which is where the other seasons finally come along, and the quality slowly starts to show the Duffers' weaknesses as storytellers to hold a possible long-running show. Season 2 was met with immense hype and expectations, and the result is a somewhat decent sequel, despite retreading on familiar ground and weird creative decisions made off by the Duffers. Season 2 picks off from the first, with Will, who was rescued from the Upside Down, is plagued by visions of the Upside Down's caretaker known as the Mind Flayer, and the characters trying to adjust to normalcy with the events of Season 1 kept secret to avoid any entanglements or tension with the new government unit occupying the Hawkins lab. The show is mainly about secrecy and failing to move on after the trauma and discovery covered up in the first season, but the show is plagued with the introduction of new characters that in ways do work until unceremoniously killed off to build artificial dramatic tension, and other characters thrown into the mix don't really offer much reason to exist, and strange subplots that function like departures from the real story we're trying to be invested in. Eleven is also back, which retcons the impactful death that happened in the first season, but is given a surrogate father-daughter relationship through Hopper before she decides to jump ship to find out about her real parentage. What her journey boils down to is a tangential episode about her finding a group of misfit criminals, linking to her upbringing at the Hawkins lab, which feels like an offshoot for a spin-off that ultimately never took off and became one of the most divided episodes of the show. Overall, this is a somewhat disappointing entry, but it somehow remains consistent as it can with most of the ensemble characters that there is something to enjoy out of this new season. And then we got Stranger Things 3, a follow-up that I enjoyed at first watch, but time has really exposed the season to be a clusterfuck of tone and writing issues with a direction which, interesting with the summer aesthetic, that ultimately falls in its face. This is where the nostalgia that at first became service to the story now devolves into a game of remember this from the 80s? The references and inclusions to stuff that existed become more of a distraction that at one point the show pauses its plot to talk about new coke. The characters except Eleven and even the recurring supporting character Billy from season 2 become flanderized for the sake of comedy with its new direction, or even characters like Lucas who are muted providing no reason why they need to be there. Hopper initially started as a serious, pragmatic, gruff, and tragic character trying to redeem his loss of his dead daughter through his actions to save Will, and raising Eleven as a surrogate daughter, is resorted to become a drunken slob who wants some of that Joyce Byers poon. It's a depressing degradation as Hopper became one of my favorite characters of the show, as now the nuance between both him and Joyce in prior seasons is already abandoned here. In the end, I just didn't even care. I didn't even care about the two. I didn't care about the fact where Hopper supposedly dies. With the push for body horror that the show promotes to try to be darker than its predecessors, the end result just shares a tonal imbalance given the story around the horror. Despite high production value with the Star Court Mall as the standout set piece, some of the show just comes off like a bad skit off SNL, such as the scenes with the underground Russian lab and the horrible song montage near the end. As for the story itself, it just follows the same beats we've seen before. The gate to the Upside Down opens again, monsters appear, and it's up to Eleven and friends to battle a new monster and shut the gate off permanently, except there are Ruskies thrown in there. And like Season 2, new characters that worked for possible exploration for the future are unceremoniously killed off for the sake of artificial dramatic tension. The Upside Down is left to be an afterthought this time, as there's no compelling mystery or intrigue to take away from it. A lot more to cover in a future video, I'm afraid. Season 3 is already a sign that the creators were running out of ideas to keep the show fresh. The show's novelty, while still talked about, simply isn't there with the quality of the show now. Which brings us to Season 4. Recently, a teaser of Stranger Things 4 was released, and much like the second trailer to The Rise of Skywalker, the trailer in the span of 30 seconds uncovers very little of the new season, showing a lot of moments that happened across the show. As recalled from Stranger Things 3, the Russian infiltration in Hawkins was stopped, but Hopper, who we thought was killed in the closing of the gate, is actually taken prisoner in Russia. Also, the Byers moved to Chicago, adopting Eleven in the process and separating themselves from Hawkins and their newfound family indefinitely. The Big Hood left from Stranger Things 3 remotely leaves us with the question how the situation with Hopper's character will turn out. There are teases of things to happen that are generating theories, such as who are the strange men who have captured Eleven? Could they be government agents? It's said that there's no record of Eleven from the Hawkins lab now, since all those records were removed in Season 2 for her to give a new chance to live normally in Hawkins. So it could possibly be Russian spies infiltrating their way to seize Eleven. And remember, she doesn't seem to be using her powers in this shot, as it might still carry the dilemma of a powerless Eleven after her fight against the Mind Flayer. Also, you see most of the young characters investigating a dark house. Could it be one of the bot homes used for the Russian tech to be planted across Hawkins? Or could it just be the Hawkins lab again, or the old Byers home? And finally, we get the four boys riding on their bikes again to try to evoke the classic moment from Stranger Things 1, which begs the question, or wait a minute, I believe that's Erica Sinclair on the right. There are some fleeting shots such as cheerleaders in Hawkins High, which will show the boys minus Will and Eleven starting high school on their own, with the promise of again more characters to be introduced. Hopper with a flamethrower gets us kind of badass, but the biggest question is, should we care? Considering that this new season will tackle various locations across Hawkins, Chicago, and Mud Russia in the most expansive season to come, it's strange that people are still living at Hawkins at this point. Hawkins had 3 incidents involving several deaths, including exposed government conspiracies, supernatural occurrences, and a corrupt mayor involved. And the state of Hawkins in Season 3 caused a lot of small businesses to be defunct, and with the Star Court Mall left in Inferno, what prosper can its townfolk and remaining characters can find in Hawkins now? What is going to be the shape of Hawkins, how it's going to look since the events of Stranger Things 3? As for the characters, the buyers caring for 11 and Hopper's capture after the events of 3 is something to gravitate, but it's an obligatory need to see where this new season will go. At this point, I don't find any of the returning characters interesting. Let's face it, did you really care about Mike, Lucas, Max, Erica, Nancy and Jonathan, Joyce and Will Byers? C. Harrington will always be a returning favorite, as his character has not suffered from any painful flanderization, and the story of him working with Robin at a video store is a worthy spin-off on its own. But no doubt in my mind, it's going to collide with the ongoing arc, reuniting the game back together. But what's going to be the scenario played out? There have been 3 self-contained seasons, and all of them end on a very victorious note, where the characters stop a threat and close the Upside Down. So what's going to take place here this time? A new monster is going to come out. The 3rd season teased us with the Demogorgon again, but why are we going back to the Demogorgon? So is it going to be another obstacle that they have to fight? And plus, is the Upside Down going to be another threat again? And will 11 and friends have to shut it down? It just goes in circles, so there's really nothing much new to introduce. And just to close my thoughts, Stranger Things will bring people back in this new climate, and it's going to cash in while the franchise is still prominent with Netflix. But as someone who still revisits that first season for that satisfying emotional experience, I find the show to be pretty hollow at this point, as the show's intrigue and ensemble of characters devolved over the course of 3 seasons. They might as well just settle for the endgame. With 2 more seasons on their way, time will judge Stranger Things 4 and whether it'll be worth the wait in 2022. But let me know, are you excited for Stranger Things 4? Like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you all for watching.